Live Editing with Dave Kelly. On today's episode, we're looking at Topaz Studio 2 again. We're working through the creative section of Topaz Studio 2. Today is the last day of looking at blurs. There's a lot of different blurs in Topaz Studio 2. Today, we're looking at motion blurs. This is going to be a pretty interesting episode. I don't really use the motion blurs, but after playing around with them a little bit, I can see where I might have to start experimenting with them, and maybe you should do that too. So let's get started and see how they work. And away we go with motion blurs. So let's come up here to add filter and come to the creative section, come down to motion blurs, give that a click, and immediately we'll see we have a motion blur on our screen. Now, the targeted tool is selected here, so you'll notice that my mouse, when I move it, you see the little target right there, a little crosshatch area. So wherever you click that, that's where your zoom blur will start at. Okay, so I can come over here and my zoom would start from there, or click here. But I want my zoom to start from the most focused part of the image, right here. So I gave it a click right there. And so now we have, of course, we have our opacity, we have our blend modes, we have our presets, we have our icon to click if we want to save a preset, we have our trash can to eliminate or delete presets, and then we have our drop down type here. Let's click that. We have zoom, motion, swirl, spin, dither, and cross. We'll look at all those. For now, we're going to start with zoom, and then we have a zoom intensity. It's very simple, so we just drag this to the right. And this gives us a zoom effect that we would do with a zoom lens. On a zoom lens, what you would do is you would put your camera on a tripod, set it up so that you would do a longer exposure, say maybe a second or 2 seconds, or a little bit less, but right around a second would probably be good. And then what you would do is you would click your shutter and you would zoom in with your zoom lens at the same time, and that would give you this kind of a look, okay, on your image. It's kind of an artistic, creative look. But you can do this right in Topaz, which I think is really nice. So that's how that works. So you can adjust the intensity of that zoom. So let's get a place where we think looks good, and I think right around in there. But I would like to have a little bit more of this flower in focus here. So I'm going to come up to the layer here, motion blur layer, and click on the layer mask. And I've showed you how to use the spot tool before. So let's just give the spot tool a click. And let's just set it up right on the flower right here. Now I have it set up with the edge aware on. I could shut that off if I wanted to, but I'm going to set it. I'm just going to adjust it to where I think it looks kind of nice. Right about there looks good. And I'm not going to mess with the transition around this for now, but I just want you to get an idea of what you can do with this zoom. And I think that looks pretty cool right there. And let's just click apply. So that's one technique that you can do. Oh, and by the way, you can come to this adjust right here and come down to density. This is not a tutorial on using the layer masks on Topaz Studio 2, but I just wanted to show you a couple little things here. So density, if I move this density to the right, I'll make this dark area go lighter. So I can add a little bit more blur back to the center of that image there, which I think it looks a little more natural right there. All right, let's take a look at the next blur. Let's come up to motion blur here and click the little eyeball to shut that effect off. And now let's come to add filter. Let's come down and get us another motion blur. Click it on. It'll default back to that zoom. Of course, I've explained all these controls over here. So let's click the drop down type here and click on motion. And when I do, in the center of the screen, and you can't move this, okay? It's right locked in the center of the screen, but you have this arrow and this little dot here. So if you drag straight up, you're adding more blur effect. All right, and that's a motion blur. And then you could drag it to the right. You could drag it all around. I hope I'm not making you dizzy, but you can drag it anywhere you want that direction to go. And what would you use this for? I don't know. This is where experimentation comes in. You got to play around. These are your little tools, and you can play with them and figure them out. You might figure out some new and creative ways of using this motion. Might want to make it look like rain or something like that. But you can do all kind of different things with it. If you have any ideas for this, or if you've messed with this motion before and you've used it and you may be very good at it, let me know in the comments below how you would use this motion blur. Okay, so let's put it on an angle here for interest. Okay, somewhere in there. And again, if I want more motion, I just drag up. If I want less, I drag down. So I'm going to put it right there. So now let's come up here to the mask. And let me grab the spot tool again. And let's just move it over the flower there again, like that. I think that looks pretty good. Let's click on apply and let's go to adjust, and let's take our density and move it a little bit to, well, that's more than a little bit, Dave. Just move it a little bit to the right so we had a little bit of blur coming through the center there. So that looks kind of cool. It looks kind of artistic. On to the next blur type. So let's come up to this motion blur layer here and click the little eyeball to shut that one off. Come back to add filter. Let's come down and get us another motion blur. This time we're going to the type here and clicking on swirl. And there's our swirl motion blur. Now, let me show you what I did here. I came and made a preset. So let's come to apply presets, click this. And I made one for swirl at this position 0.00. Let's click that on and I'll show you what I did here. So let's just move this to the center of the flower. And basically what I did was I set the swirl angle to 0.00 and I saved that as a preset because I thought this is really good, because I don't like where this filter defaults itself. I wish it would default itself at 0. That way I can position my target tool here wherever I want it to go. So I would recommend that you would make yourself a preset. And to do that, all you have to do is move this swirl angle to 0.00, come up here to this little preset icon here, give it a click and give it a name, and you can give it a description, click OK. And then when you do, it'll be up here in this list of presets. All right, so I highly recommend that you do that. All right, so now let's take the swirl angle, and if I move it to the left, I'll swirl this to the left. If I move it to the right, I'll swirl it to the right. And I don't want to make you dizzy, but you can go like crazy with this. Isn't that wild? Okay. It's like, where would you use this? I don't know, but I could maybe figure out some ways. You might want to just like angle your flower a little bit. So that looks kind of cool. That's one thing you could do with it, which I think looks kind of fun there. I kind of like that. I might have to remember that. All right. So, and again, as I always say, experimentation is key. Here's what I would do here. I'm going to make my picture a little bit smaller. And I think what I'll do is adjust the size of this target here to the full size of the image. Okay, like that. Move this over here a little bit. Now watch when I adjust the swirl. It'll take that swirl. So that's kind of cool. Like, you can create patterns. I mean, you might want to use this on a website or something with some text or something. You just might want a swirly pattern. That's one usage you could have. Move it to the right and the swirl goes the opposite way, which is kind of fun. And it keeps dancing around and dancing around. It's also fun just to play with. So that looks kind of cool right there. What if I like that right there? Let's click the target tool here so that goes away. And like before, let's come up to the motion blur top layer here and come to the masking tool right here. Give it a click. And let's go back to the spot tool here. Move it over the flower here. And let's come down to the adjust and just take the density to the right. So we'll make this dark area a little bit lighter, and we'll add a little bit more of the swirl over top of the image here by adjusting the density. See, if I go the whole way to the right, it'll totally make it turn white. But let's just back it off so we see the flower, but we see a little bit of swirl kind of emanating from it. If you have any creative ideas on how to use this motion swirl, please leave them in the comments below. All right, let's come back up to the motion blur top layer and click the eyeball and shut that one off. And let's go back to add filter and come down and click motion blur again. Boy, there's a lot in here. Come to type and let's come down to spin. This is similar to the swirl, but it's a little bit different, not quite as dramatic. So let's take the spin for a test drive here. So let's go ahead. We have a spin angle and we have an inner circle clarity and we have a target tool. Of course, the target tool, we can click anywhere that we want that spin to originate from. So if I wanted it to originate from this left side, I could click here. But I'm going to click it right on the flower right here. All right, and then I could take the spin angle, move it to the right, and add more spin, take it to the left, and take spin away. So let's move it to the right. Let's add some spin in here, maybe somewhere right around in there. And then we have the inner circle clarity. So if I move this to the right, it'll just kind of masks out the center, kind of like as a layer mask would do. So maybe right around there, which is the whole way up. And if I wanted it more, I could come up to the layer mask and click that. And this time let's just take a paintbrush and just come in here and let's just paint around here. Now I do have the edge aware on, so let's just paint around the flower here a little bit. And maybe a little bit on the edge here and a little bit on that edge here. And maybe a smidge down there. Okay. And maybe I want my stem to show through. So let me make my radius a little bit smaller. And come down where I think the stem is, which is probably right around in here. And look, there my stem is popping through. That's pretty cool. So there is the... What was the name of that? Let's go back up to motion blur and click on this layer here. And that was the spin. I forgot the name there for a second. Sorry about that. On to the next one. Let's come back up to the top motion blur layer and click the eyeball to shut that one off and come back to add filter. Come down to motion blur again. And this time, let's come under type, click the drop down menu and come to the next one, which is called Dither. For the life of me, guys, I don't know when you would ever use dither. So let's go over this one quickly. So let me zoom into the image here. And can you see that? That's the dither, that little pattern. It almost looks like a canvas pattern or something on the screen. But that's the dither. And, of course, we can adjust the dither radius. We can drag it to the right and adjust that radius up. And it makes the image look more blurrier. And... that dither pattern seems to only show up on areas that are more in focus. Let me zoom out a little bit. Okay, so you can see like in this area, in these out of focus areas, you don't really see much dithering on them. Let's zoom in. Yeah, you mainly see it on areas that had more focus originally on them. But there's the dither, okay? So let's take the dither sample up and see what that does. Let's zoom in. Maybe we can get a better idea here. And I'll tell you, I'm at a loss with this one. I don't know what this is good for. There may be a great usage for this. And if you know it, please leave it in the comments below. But gosh, for the life of me, I'm just being honest. I don't know why I would ever use this. So there's the dither. Let's move on to the next one. So let's come back up to the top layer motion blur. And, oh, I forgot one other thing. We also have random dither on or off. So let's zoom in. Let's shut the random dither. Let's turn the random dither on. Okay, it looks more like a noisy type look on the image. Okay, so it's adding a noisy look. And when I turn it off, it looks more like that pattern. So which one do you prefer? I'll be honest with you, I don't like either. So I'm moving on. So let's go to the eyeball here and shut it off and come back to add filter and come back down to motion blur. And let's look at our last one under type. Let's click it and it is called cross. Another one I don't really think I have a need for. And if you do, please let me know in the comments section below. So let's zoom in here. And let's take the cross weight and move it to the right. And it puts like a little bit of a crossy type pattern. Can you see it in there? Let's zoom out. So it's adding a little cross type pattern in there. Maybe like a diamond look. Might figure out a need for that, but I don't know. And it seems like the pattern basically shows up in the area that was in focus. It doesn't really show up much in the other areas. So that is the cross. Again, I don't really find a real need for this one, but if you do know, please leave in the comments section below. Let's recap these motion blurs. Now, the last one we did was the cross. That's this one right here. Let's shut this eye off. Let's click on the next layer. We'll turn that eye on. This was the dither. Let's shut that one off. The next one was the spin. I really like that one. Let's shut that one off. The next was the hypnotic swirl. That's really very, very interesting. Let's shut that one off. The next one is the motion. Now remember the motion, you could move that motion any direction that you would like. Let's shut that one off. And the first one we did was the zoom. Well, that's a wrap. That was the motion blurs. Some pretty cool stuff there, right? Well, thank you for joining me today. If you enjoyed this one, please give it a like and share it with your friends. And also, if you're not yet a subscriber with this channel, please do so and click that bell notification icon. This way you'll be informed of all the new training tutorials that I'm putting out. Well, I'll see everybody right here on The Joy of Editing with Dave Kelly next time.